Welcome into 12 News at 10. I'm Rachel Hackbar.
And I'm Michael Schweike. Following the results from tonight's Kansas presidential preference primary. Those results coming into our newsroom here. A lot of them going final here in the last hour. So here's how everything stands. Showing incumbent candidate President Joe Biden winning the Kansas Democratic nomination, 84% of tallied votes. So far, it's estimated about 90% of votes have been counted as we look here. Former President Trump also winning the state's Republican nomination, 75%. Roughly so far of the votes. Early estimates showing about 95% of the votes have been counted in that race.
Another point worth noting in the Republican nomination, while former President Donald Trump is the clear winner in that race, Nikki Haley was able to pull in 16% of the votes in the Republican nomination. She received more than 14,700 votes, despite already dropping out following President Biden and former President Trump securing of their party's nomination.
As we look at these results tonight, another thing worth noting here comes in the form of votes received for none of the names shown on the ballot. Category coming in second in the Democratic nomination tonight, 10% of the votes saying no one on the ballot. Additionally, same category coming in third tonight on the Republican side at 5%. Voters marking this option likely as a sign they are not happy with any of the names they see on the ballot.